Afternoon, guys. Thanks very much for coming, and thank you, Hemp and CBD Media, for inviting us. My name's Tim Phillips, and I'm going to be your chairman this afternoon. We've got about an hour to talk about various issues around CBD and cannabis products in light of what's happening with Brexit. So let me introduce myself, and I'll get you guys to introduce yourselves, and then we'll chat through some of the areas. So my name, as I said, is Tim Phillips. I'm the managing director of CBD Intel. We're a data service for the CBD sector. We have a team of lawyers and market analysts who provide data on the CBD sector worldwide. Can I go to you, Stuart? You introduce yourself, and let's just go around the table and introduce ourselves.
Sure. My name's Stuart McKenzie, and I'm the founder and CEO of Reakiro Group. We've got a couple of companies in Reakiro. Our main business is extraction. We do CBD, THC extraction in Uruguay, California, and we do CBD in Poland. Additional to that, we actually use hemp for hemp insulation, hemp building construction, of which we want to then build that into industrial goods application later on.
Great.
John Paul Doran, CEO and founder of Eco Equity. We've got a facility in Zimbabwe where I was born. Cultivating medicinal cannabis, cloned the term. Yep. We've also just acquired a license in Antigua and are looking practically at other locations globally where we can execute our business model. We've also just incepted a hedge fund in Guernsey called JPD Capital, which will be cannabis-led.
Great.
I'm Colin Morgan, the Business Development Director in ADAS. ADAS is a well-established agricultural services business. It's owned by the company RSK, which is the biggest independent environmental consultancy in the UK. And our particular angle on cannabis is as an agricultural business. We'd like to see a lot more value derived from cannabis cultivation in the UK. And really we're able to help farmers and the agricultural sector make this crop a real success for the UK.
Great.
I'm Peter Reynolds. I've been a medical journalist for about 30 years, but I've been involved in the cannabis reform movement for even longer than that. And then happily, I suppose about 20 years ago, the two sort of came together. As a result of that, I'm the leader of Clear Cannabis Law Reform, which is the oldest established cannabis reform group in the UK. We've set up a trade association specifically for the CBD and hemp industries, primarily because we see the development of properly responsible, properly well-regulated industries like that as fundamental to reform. They will drive further reform. And again, happily, over the last few years, the knowledge that I've developed over all these years has come together, and I'm now making my living primarily out of consulting and advising on things like licensing and product development and things like that.
Great. Okay, thanks. So, Brexit. Not that it hasn't been discussed to death, but what we're here to talk about is really what do we think the impacts of Brexit are going to be on the CBD sector, and a little bit wider potentially on some of the other cannabis areas of interest. What I thought I would just say, a few ground rules, and Peter's already picked me up on this, but I don't want the discussion to get too political. I think what we need to be looking at is kind of objectively trying to understand what the potential impacts are going to be. So we've got three main scenarios for Brexit, and clearly the one is a no deal, two is some kind of a managed exit, so an agreed deal, and three is some kind of revocation and continuation, I guess, of the EU being a member of the UK being a member of the EU. I suspect all three of those we should talk about in terms of all of these issues. But look, what I'd like to talk about to start with, particularly from those of you in business in CBD, is to talk a little bit about trade barriers. So one of the first things that is going to be an impact of Brexit is potential trade barriers on international trade. Stuart, I wondered if I could just come to you to start with. You have an international business, so I think you're well placed to talk about that. What impact do you think Brexit will have on your business, and then more generally, what is it going to do to the CBD sector, do you think?
I think at the moment we supply white label, and we also have distribution partners in the UK from our Polish facility. It's more regulatory problems right now than it is about Brexit, to be honest, as we're facing, is that people are very scared of the Novel Food Act. These things are much more impactful right now than Brexit, to be honest. I think people may feel that Brexit may be over the next several years and they'll be able to work it out. The more important thing right now is this Novel Food Act on some regulatory issues, where people are actually running down stock, they're keeping minimum stock, they're not investing too far ahead in the future. And when I look across our customers in Europe, that's not the case. At least whether we agree with the regulation they have in Germany or Portugal or wherever, at least there's clear guidelines where we can build business.
I think obviously people in the UK don't even know to what extent this might apply to them, depending on which scenario for Brexit.
Exactly, right. And then you add Brexit on top of that, and I think then you've got a very nervous business that's not really going to drive investment where it should be, not just in the CBD or cannabis area, but within the whole hemp industrial applications sector. And it's just like probably one of many industries at the moment like that that's a shame right now, because it should be thriving as it is around the world.
Let's come back to the regulation point, because I think the novel food thing I definitely think we should touch on. But let's just go back to this idea of trade barriers. So for you at the moment, with a facility in Poland, you're not foreseeing or you're not concerned nearly as much about the potential barriers that will come down if the UK leaves without some kind of, as in a no-deal Brexit. You don't think that that's going to cause major problems for your business in the UK?
To be the honest answer is we don't know. I just don't know.
Nor does anyone, right?
But if it does, we'll do like most people businesses, and we'll try and find a way how to work within that environment. If we can't, we just focus on other markets that are much easier to develop and work with. That's going to be the case. We'll just have to look upon it and see what happens.
I don't think there will be a no-deal exit. I don't think there was ever going to be a no-deal exit, because even if there was what the media like to call a no-deal exit, it would still have in fact involved a lot of sort of smaller agreements that would have enabled some sort of transition. Inevitably, it would bound. That's the way markets work.
One of the things I would like to see, I think many people in the industry like to see, is that the whole hemp industry is about sustainability. So we should be looking locally anyway. We shouldn't really be worried about Europe or anything. It should be about farmers growing locally for the local environment and supplying the housing or food industries or CBD industry. So we should really look internally as a UK and say, what's our solution? And forget all the other Brexit solutions. You can't ship hemp across the world. It doesn't make sense.
It's ridiculous to be importing.
Let's even just try not to think about Brexit and focus, if we can, on there is a business, sustainable business. It ticks all the boxes that the world movement's doing just now in terms of environmentally friendly, sustainable, biodegradable products. Let's maybe focus on that. Brexit shouldn't matter.
So then I'm afraid what it comes down to is how do you use the politics to get our lawmakers to construct a system of regulation that enables us to do that. Because at the moment, everything is opposed to what we're doing.
I suppose the question is, does a good Brexit make it more likely or less likely for us to be able to control our regulations in a way that's more amenable to create a good value chain in the UK? That's often how we think about it. So if regardless, no deal or revocation, etc., can we be in a position in the UK to create great, fantastic value chains which are sustainable and responsible? That's, I think, where we need to be looking, actually. And these really just create sort of environments for that, I think, perhaps, to take place.
So maybe we go there a bit, Colin, and just dig a bit further on that. So tell us a little bit about the agricultural environment for hemp growing in the UK, and what does Brexit potentially mean for that, do you think?
Yeah, so I think if I give you a quick anecdote about where we've come into this recently, we actually did a paper for DEFRA back in the early 2000s on hemp and linseed production in the UK. And I remember when I started in the business about a year ago or so, looking at new avenues to explore, people were saying, well, we're actually working on crop research years ago in hemp. And kind of fast forwarding to today, really, you've got some really interesting drivers in the marketplace. So, for instance, not only about the being sustainable, all the claims that people make about it being a sustainable to produce crop, and obviously about the inherent sustainability values. But also you've got interesting drivers in place, such as the Agriculture Bill and the Environment Bill. And of course the Agriculture Bill makes a real departure for how farming gets paid for, basically. So we've had the Common Agricultural Policy, which is a cornerstone of European policy, of course. Leaving Europe gives us the opportunity to do that differently. Back actually in October 2018, the Agriculture Bill had its second reading in Parliament, and you may remember it's all about public money for public goods, and it's all about, can farming produce better outcomes in terms of biodiversity, soil quality, climate resilience, all these factors. And when you go down the list, it's all ticking those boxes around hemp production. So actually, if you take the domestic market, the demand for the product, you take the inherent qualities of cannabis cultivation, and we think actually combining these, that's why we think it'd be quite good to have a good value chain in the UK, which helps farmers meet some of those challenges around the Agriculture Bill. And then if you fast forward again to some of the other policies, such as the Environment Bill and the 25-year environmental plan, there are a lot of areas where we're going to need to do a lot of work around agriculture to make it much more sustainable. Of course, already we have great quality agriculture in the UK, so if you could take that and apply it to cannabis crops, it could be very interesting opportunities for us. So really that's the kind of legislative underpinning on that side.
Okay, so that's great in theory. So what's the practical reality? Are there farmers out there who are pushing hard to start growing hemp, and can they switch around pretty fast? I mean, what's the lead time for farmers to start growing the crop?
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because about a year and a half ago now, so we put a web page up. And one of the great things about ADAS is people, because of our heritage, and particularly once being part of the Ministry of Agriculture, people have a great deal of trust in the business and what we do. We're all about good quality research, we're independent, we're objective, we're apolitical. So people will come to us for solid science, basically. And when we put our ADAS page up saying, you know, we're open to talk about cannabis with agriculturalists, we were inundated with inquiries. And I spent quite a few months actually.
When was this? Sorry,
about 18 months ago.
Right,
actually.
okay. So round about the time of the change in the law then, or the new regulations?
Well,
The new medicinal cannabis?
yes, absolutely. Yes.
Is this indoor, or is this hemp outdoor, or is it both?
Yes, this is field scale crops basically. And
But a lot of people were under the impression that medicinal cannabis could conceivably be grown outdoors in this country, or indeed in Ireland, which of course
yeah,
it was.
absolutely. So we're talking about field cultivated cannabis in normal crop rotation of other crops, etc. And we got a lot of inquiries, and then of course, very quickly you're having the conversation about CBD production, and then really you get a narrowing of ambition, if you like, back down to the seeds and the fibre. Yeah. But actually, still regularly we get a great deal of interest in basically the practical elements of how to grow cannabis in a field. Yeah. And then you get the next elements of the question, so where can it be used, how can it be used, and then straight away you're into the value chain infrastructure problems and challenges. And this is where we think, if you take a few steps back and say, okay, if you compare it with other sectors, let's say wheat, of course, which is going to be much bigger anyway, all the development work which goes into those crops, all the applications, all the trust that's been built over generations, the amount of research that goes into it, the crop trials, all these kind of aspects. And then you realise that in the UK, obviously, because of where it is, cannabis has none of this activity around it. So straight away you say, not only is it an opportunity economically for farmers, particularly then if you link in the CBD, but also in terms of the whole value chain from seeds and crop protection agents, etc., etc. And then you overlay biodiversity aspects and the agriculture. Yeah, but I mean, behind that, very interesting proposition in UK farming.
But underneath all of this is the fact that it all depends on Home Office licensing, and the Home Office is institutionally opposed to cannabis. Absolutely. For since before 1971, it's been doing everything it can to campaign, and I use that word deliberately, against cannabis. And even today, although there's been more interest in hemp recently. I heard last week, that a colleague, a friend, an associate, has recently had 2 industrial hemp applications refused on on the basis that this site isn't suitable. Now, and both, I mean, and looking at it, he explained to me where these sites were, and I can't see any reason why they shouldn't be suitable. I obtained a license on behalf of a client earlier in the year, which was bounded on 3 sides by public roads. Is in not in a built-up area, but is very close to London. And so, if anything, that could have been described as unsuitable. And for other reasons as well, it seemed that there seems to be constant uncertainty in the Home Office about what exactly their policy is going to be. The policy is completely opaque.
It's also the revoking of licences. I've seen a number of stories over the last couple of months that have been extremely prevalent of the Home Office revoking licences. I don't think there's a proper framework in place for the Home Office to decide, A, who should be licensed.
Well, it does it all behind closed doors anyway.
What is the process?
It does it all behind closed doors, and if you ask any questions about it, I mean, I've umpteen FOI requests on this and slightly, similar issues to the Home Office, and they all get pushed back on the basis that, it's commercially confidential or it might encourage the commission of a crime. Everything is completely opaque, and underneath that, as I say, is this whole culture that they are institutionally opposed to cannabis.
Again, that's why it was a closed market for us and an easy decision to operate overseas.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I've seen that. I mean, I was working for a Canadian company that wanted a medicinal cannabis license in this country. Nobody in the world, I won't mention the name, but nobody in the world would have been better qualified to be given a license by the Home Office. They were so. The Home Office's attitude to them was, this was before the reform, but nevertheless, the Home Office's attitude was absurd. Absolutely absurd. And when they were, in fact, the complete reversal of fortune, as you're probably familiar with, where the African country concerned actually offer them money to go there and do, why should they bother with the UK?
Exactly right.
Well, sorry, I was just going to interrupt. So, Colin, just to finish on that, so what's your thinking about this point that Peter's raising, right? Which is great. It's there's lots of demand from farms to grow. There's clearly lots of demand for end user products and growing. So is this a barrier, and are you seeing that as a major barrier?
Yes, absolutely. That's the point I was going to come to, actually.
Right.
Thanks, Peter, for prompting me.
Sorry.
So, yeah, basically, we.
Sorry if I
We've seen lots of demand from interested farmers wanting to get into the marketplace. But then, as Peter correctly points out, we've had the same a bit further on, where farmers have been frustrated with the application process. And then you end up basically where they have been able to get a license. It's for a couple of products, of course, which don't necessarily stack up. There's not a value chain there for it. And of course, as is often said, the golden piece of the jigsaw could be the production of CBD in the UK, number one, and number two, with the right regulatory wrap around it and clarity. Actually, I mean, it took us a little bit of time to get absolutely clear, because we really started from a very simple perspective, which is in the marketplace. People who know ADAS don't necessarily expect us to be talking about cannabis, even though we've done a piece of work in the past. Wheat, oats, cows, all these kind of things, but not cannabis.
Cannabis is evil, wicked stuff. So we don't talk about it in polite society.
Well, it's interesting. So, the first conversation is really about education. We're going to talk about cannabis because that's the plant. And we're going to talk about other applications and how it could play a role in agriculture in the UK. But absolutely, number one sticking point is the regulations, and perhaps the Home Office is not the best place to regulate this element of agriculture potentially.
Except that, I couldn't agree more. Except the trouble is that, cannabis is a very wide, broad subject, and it can range from something that is completely benign to something that potentially can be, it needs some degree of regulation.
But that's not really for us in our line of work to really think about. We're basically saying, is there a real positive economic benefit here for British agriculture to get behind it and produce home grown?
What we need to be doing, and I am a campaigner, is we need the whole industry in its broadest sense needs to be concerted lobbying efforts. Each one of us has we have representatives of our organisations, at least, who've got MPs. And the way you do this, I've done it before and I know it works, is you go and see your MPs. You don't write to your MP. You can write to him once if you want, but you get into a ping-pong correspondence with your MP, it's a complete waste of time. You go and see your MP. You've got a right to go and see your MP. You go and sit with your MP. We organise this so we're all singing off the same hymn sheet with the same points we want to get across. We're not hairy hippies going and asking to be able to smoke a joint, and that's what it's. But we're not. When MPs see, and I saw this happen with medical cannabis, when MPs see that these are normal, reasonable people with significant stories to tell and reasonable demands to make. That's what makes it happen. That's what we need to do. We need a concerted lobbying effort to make the British Parliament force the government to put in a system of regulation that makes sense.
You've got to ask why it's taken so long from regulation coming in May last year, was it, to the announcement of, to my knowledge, one of the largest and first clinical trials announced this week. Why has it taken a year?
You mean the 20,000 patients?
Yeah.
Drug science. Yeah. Well, I mean, in a sense, I'm not surprised it's taken that long, to be honest with you. I mean, I think there's also this. We're moving on to medicinal cannabis now, but I mean, that whole issue of, whether cannabis. Cannabis is a substance that contains somewhere between 400 and 500 different molecules. How can you possibly regulate that in the same way as a single molecule pharmaceutical product that's been synthesized in a lab? How can you possibly do this?
Right.
Particularly when we know, and we do know now, one of my clients in particular has hard evidence on this, of the truth of the entourage effect. That is, that cannabis for medicinal purposes does not, isolated compounds do not work. Cannabis works through a combination of compounds, not just cannabinoids either.
Exactly.
Terpenes and flavonoids. That's
right.
how it works. And how can we possibly regulate something like that within the context of the existing pharma regulation? We can't.
Well, let's come back to the regulation thing. I want to stay a little bit on the supply, so the farming and impact. Let's bring it also back to Brexit, right? Still, John Paul, I want to bring you in.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've got grow facilities in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
What impact does that have on your business? You're interested, I suspect, in the idea of being able to import into the UK. What do you think?
Not at all.
No. Okay.
Not
So
at all.
So Brexit will have no impact on you?
No.
No. Fine.
It's not something I'm concerned with.
Right.
I think what will be will be. The people who make the decisions in this country will do so, I hope, for the best of the country. But it doesn't determine or dictate my business path. We're extremely reactive in our approach in any case. If we did want to enter the UK, we'd navigate so successfully, regardless of the outcome of Brexit.
All right. So look, maybe wider then. So and talking about the raw materials. So growing and the flour and Stuart, you can come in here as well. But a lot of people are talking about the raw ingredient and the fact that the wholesale price for CBD is dropping really rapidly. It's why we've got people like you looking at growing in cheaper regions like Zimbabwe and so on. So what do you think is going to happen over the next year or so? What is globally going to happen to this product?
I'd like to see a global framework in place, maybe a trade exchange that's set up within the financial industry. I'd also like to have consumer awareness of what they're actually consuming. If you look at your local petrol station, your local corner shop, everybody's jumped on the bandwagon. Are those consumer ready, those products? I think for the industry to develop where I believe it should be, and that is on a medicinal side, precision medicine, there needs to be a lot more education and there needs to be a lot more research undertaken. I think the financial rewards are, on the tip of everybody's tongue in terms of this industry. But what perhaps is being lost in translation is we have the ability to affect millions of lives, patients that desperately need an alternative form of medicine. For us in Zimbabwe, it was an easy move because I was born there. We understand the terrain and, of course, cost of production. You look at how much patients are going to have to pay for UK-produced precision medicine. It's not conducive to the ordinary working class person who requires that, which I think is a crying shame. Where we've positioned ourselves is we want to make it accessible. our business model, yes, we have an obligation to our investors, but our investors also have bought into our ethos. We want to provide consistent quality at an affordable price.
Yeah, great. Okay, and Stuart, maybe you wanted to say something about that. I mean, you know, so the global market for hemp products and particularly extracted CBD. What's the future, do you think?
It's huge at the moment. We're working on 11 projects just now on every corner of the planet. Everybody's saying, I've got some land, I'm only looking at growing hemp. We've all been through this before. Yeah. And then, of course, then you have to look deeper, and you mentioned before it comes down to seeds or fibre or whatever it comes down to. But certainly if the price of CBD comes down, the whole economics of growing...
the economics change.
Yeah, it would have to be looked at. Saying that, there's a lot of people growing hemp at the moment, and there's a lot of people going, how the hell do I process this? And what do I turn it into? They put the cart before the horse a lot of the time. People need to get the distribution channels correct before they even start producing anything. You're finding a lot of people just saying, hey, build it and they will come. Well, no, they're not.
I mean, in the UK, and particularly in the context of Brexit, you know, one of the other issues is whether farmers. It's all very well if you covered it from the end of wanting to produce hemp for CBD or cannabis purposes. But if you're looking at it from the point of view of a farmer, a small farmer, you know, who's got a couple of 100 acres, what he's concerned about is putting food on his table.
Yes.
You know, and if he's not going to grow hemp unless he's got somewhere to sell it.
Yes.
And there was a hemp processing plant in Halesworth near Ipswich, a hemp technology, which closed about 2 or 3 longer ago than that now.
Okay, I don't
but
know.
I mean, there's now nowhere to sell it.
Right, of course. Well, that's the major problem, right?
You know,
and it's very expensive to transport it.
Yes,
It's a long way, right?
exactly.
Well, the thing is, if the UK doesn't get involved in this, it's just going to be importing from everywhere else. I mean, you're just going to be getting from France and everywhere else.
Exactly. It's
around the
completely
world.
absurd.
So, yeah, we should be producing it.
And there's no logic to it,
and be
particularly
aggressive.
CBD. Yeah, absolutely. There's no point in importing it. We can grow it perfectly well here.
Yes.
If the economics stack up at local level.
Agreed.
And that's what the world needs. The world needs that model.
It does.
Right?
I agree
And we know,
completely. I mean, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face, really, in a sense, aren't you? Because I mean, you're advocating a sort of domestic policy, as you quite rightly say, for production of these things. That means that you won't be exporting from Poland to the UK.
That's also true, absolutely. But you know, not to
but
say that I'd go to be part of that business. But it's the right model.
Yes, exactly.
Right,
yeah.
and it's the right model across the world.
Yeah.
And some areas will, you know, if you're in a, I say the same in America when we're in there, you know, if you're in a state where it's a very, there's a lot of oil business, then your production will be for the oil industry. If you're next to a paper factory, you'll be producing for the paper guy. You want to be friends with these guys. These guys will buy if you give them enough volume on the right price and to make it economically feasible.
Associated industries and so on. Basically.
Right. You know,
But there's still the issue in the States, though, with the Farm Bill. You know, and I mean, although everybody hoped that would sort out the situation with hemp, and it's still settling in. I mean, essentially, it has made hemp legal throughout the states. It's removed it entirely from the Controlled Substance Act, hasn't it?
Yes.
And yet people are still getting busted for hemp.
It's incredibly complicated.
They still have their own sort
I
of
agree.
quasi-novel foods thing going on with the FDA.
Yeah.
And then also it comes back to what's going on at the UN. And with the whole reclassification or rescheduling of cannabis.
Yeah.
Well,
let's talk about that.
And everybody's going just for the flower. I mean, just for the CBD. The whole stock's just going in the ground as compost. You know, at the moment. But now there's a movement to try and say that how can they process this?
Yeah. Sustainable fibre use. I mean, and particularly clothes and things like this. I mean, great example
Hemp
where
plastic.
Hemp plastics. There's probably a gold mine sitting there, but it's about the process and the value chain, the economics are changing. I mean, if you take cotton, for instance, you know, cotton uses a significant proportion of the world's agricultural resources, particularly water and crop controls, and also in some parts of the world, it's associated with child labour.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, sorry to my reform hat on again. You know, what banned cannabis in Europe in the first place, and this was before it was banned in the US. What banned cannabis was lobbying by Egyptian cotton farmers. It's a forerunner of the League of Nations when they were the International Opium Convention, I think, and they said we want to add cannabis in because it's a dangerous drug as well. What was really going on was they were the cotton farmers and they didn't want the hemp industry.
You can well imagine it. But look, maybe we come back to this point that you raised, Peter, actually, which is just the interaction and the mess on regulation. I mean, look, we're going to spend a lot of time probably talking about regulation because Brexit has a big impact on regulation. But one of the things that I thought might be interesting to talk about, the CBD sector, particularly in Europe, is a sector that is booming, lots of consumer demand, but it's booming in as you pointed out, in a kind of a regulatory vacuum, in a regulatory grey area. Politically as well, it seems that it's much more acceptable. So CBD, as an anecdote, my mum would be very happy. She's totally fine with me working in CBD, right? I think she'd have a very different opinion if I was working in cannabis, even though I keep telling her it's the same thing. Yeah, exactly. but that's just, these are just words, but they mean a lot, right? And I think what you're saying about the farm bill in the US as well. I mean, the big problem is that we've got this CBD sector banging up against the wider cannabis sector. So. Medical use, adult recreational use, and so on. What do you think is going to happen? What is the future? How are these two sectors going to interact with one another? And I thought, Peter, you'd be, good to start that discussion.
Well, I mean, I think you have to look at it in two limbs, don't you? You have to look at the European limb, or the EU limb, and the UK limb. I'm optimistic. I'm always an optimistic person, and I do think that if we get to Brexit done and move on to, I mean, obviously with the withdrawal bill, we will carry over whatever regulation is already in place for the transitional period. Yeah. But once we get everything under our own control, take back control, all these slogans keep on coming out, then I am optimistic. I think that we will, at least the people who are going to be making the regulations are going to be directly accountable to us. And they're not going to be, again, it sounds like a slogan, they're not going to be faceless, unaccountable bureaucrats somewhere else.
Faceless, unaccountable bureaucrats here.
But then what we come back to is what I said a minute ago, and that is that we have to get concerted and properly organised lobbying about parliamentary representatives, and they have to be, the whole thing makes complete sense, doesn't it? I mean, the whole argument,
the jigsaw together, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. And we just have to knock their heads together and get them to do something sensible.
So you're optimistic that there's the chance of more sensible regulation and potentially bringing these two areas together is improved by Brexit?
It makes them more directly accountable.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, having said that, of course, and as I said, the EU is making noises about regulating the whole of the cannabis space itself. Yeah. And that's a good thing. And whatever happens, I mean, I'm a Europhile, I'm an EU phobe, but I mean, whatever happens, we're still going to be closely aligned with all the countries in Europe, in some way or another. Of course we are.
Yeah.
But just to add, I mean, Europe's all over the place as well. I mean, you go to Austria, Germany. I mean, it's very difficult for me as a producer of a white label own brand to try. Every country is different, and as you know, and there's 5 interpretations of each one of those.
Exactly right.
And we can help you with that, Stuart. But no, I agree. It's incredibly messy, and okay. Well, look. So bringing it back to Brexit. So what about? What about the UK's position? Do you think that the UK's government is moving and is more likely to move faster, given what you said, Peter, so that we have a better chance to create some meaningful regulatory environment around the cannabis space with Brexit? What impact do you think that might have on the rest of Europe? Given that every European country is doing something different, what do you think that the UK potentially leaving the EU could mean that we become a thought leader in this sector? Is that something that might happen?
I think we've missed the boat on that already. I think Germany has taken pole position on that.
Right. Mainly though, I guess, because of the medical regime that they've got in place, and it's working, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. They're precise, concise, and they've acted swiftly. Yeah. While we've been dithering, we had the ability to be at the forefront of this market. We're proclaiming to be. But how can you proclaim to be at the forefront of the market when you can't even put in legislation for yourself? Makes no sense. It's a complete contradiction. Yeah. I think Brexit hasn't helped. Looking at the timeline of when we legalised and did we have the ability to really implement a proper framework while Brexit was happening? I do have some sympathy, but let's not try and, hoodwink the sector and try and proclaim to be thought-provoking, thought-leading, when, quite frankly, we're not. I think we are falling behind our counterparts in Europe.
Yeah.
And I've got a fear that if we leave with a no deal, we will be shunned in the cannabis industry because of our lack of direction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Look, I mean, the interesting thing, I guess, is as well whether you think that regulation leads markets or the other way around. I mean, my personal view is I think that markets lead regulation. Regulation takes a long time to come through. It's reflective of what the general public are thinking, and that takes a long time to change, which is why we've got this weird situation where kind of CBD is being accepted in this country and the market has moved forward significantly, right? The UK is definitely Europe's leading CBD market. It's really growing fast here. But that's not reflected in the regulation. You're quite right. We're falling behind in many ways on that sense. But look, my personal view is I think that that regulation
Where's
will
the
follow.
CBD being made?
Well, right,
Grown
not in the
It's
UK.
outside,
Yeah,
right?
sure. Yeah. But the demand.
So
most
why,
of-
or that big market we're talking about, why don't we produce it locally?
Exactly right.
Yeah,
That's a
Well,
massive
exactly right.
Well, look, but the reason is because the regulations are behind, and so we can't. But I mean, I think what's interesting about consumer demand. I mean, consumer forces are the strongest forces around, right? Much stronger than regulation. I think that's important to point out.
Even stronger than politicians.
Even stronger than politicians, believe it or not.
I do wonder though, actually, in terms of that the marketplace, if you don't in the UK have some level of more sensible regulation and value chain creation, is there a risk here at some point, because of trust or reputation or what have you, that there's a destabilisation of that customer demand? I mean, I'm generally,
I agree.
it sort of peaks out. And,
I mean, there's completely. Although we talk about these regulations and it being difficult in the UK, it's actually like the Wild West. I mean, there's a shop in Oxford Street. I get these stories all the time. But this last week, there's a shop in Oxford Street selling, what we're calling CBD buds, which are cannabis, which we know are illegal because they are simply cannabis. It doesn't matter what the THC content is. But these don't even pretend to be below 0.2% and therefore legal. The usual. They actually say on the pack 1.9% THC, and it's on sale in a shop in Oxford Street.
Really?
Yeah, standard.
There's nothing going on.
Well, it won't be there for long, presumably, but especially
Well,
now
no,
that you
but-
said it's
but-
camera.
It will be.
But no, you're right.
It's probably zero THC. They're just making up.
All right. Look, so we started to talk about regulation. So this, and then bring it back to Brexit again. So novel food and the novel food changes that are happening in the UK are very important for the CBD sector. Clearly, because CBD sublingual oils is still one of the biggest categories in the CBD space. So the way that the novel food law is interpreted is going to be very important.
It's not a law.
What's your view about how that will develop given Brexit? Tell us a little bit about it, Peter, and then.
Okay, so the novel food. Everybody probably knows this. The novel food catalogue is a catalogue of foods and substances, including ingredients in foods that ostensibly were not consumed in the area on a widespread basis in the area now known as the EU. So it was prior to 1997. So if there was a substance that wasn't in widespread consumption before that, it's regarded as novel, and it then has to go through some convoluted authorization process, which is essentially about safety. It's about ensuring that the substance or the food is safe. Now, not out of the blue entirely, because there have been discussions going on for about 2 years that I was aware of, but these discussions were very vague. And then in January of this year, it was announced, and this comes from something called the EU Novel Foods Working Group, which is basically the Food Standards Agency and their opposite number in all the other EU states working together. They had decided they were going to add cannabis extracts to the novel food catalogue. There's also, it excludes hemp seed oil, which, by any normal definition of the term would still be a cannabis extract, but no, it excludes that. It excludes hemp seeds. But cannabis extracts, which essentially are CBD. Because let's remember, we talk about CBD products. An accurate term for all these products are actually low THC cannabis extracts. That's what they are, really. And then they said they were doing this because the industry had been asked to produce evidence that these weren't novel foods and had failed to do so. Now, I simply say bleep to that, because, you know, we have told them. They've been provided with evidence. And since they made this move at the beginning of January, they've been provided with comprehensive evidence. And I take my hat off to the European Industrial Hemp Association, who have led the way on this and still are leading the way on it, you know, and have presented evidence to the EU showing the use of cannabis extracts actually advertised, you know, as advertising existed in those days as far back as the 12th century. You know, also the estimable Richard Rose, you know, known as the Hemp Nuts, who's now based in Europe.
Yes, I know.
You know, makes the very good point that in older periods when, you know, hemp seeds when they were harvested weren't as thoroughly washed and stuff as they are now. That at that time, everybody was consuming hemp seeds, was consuming resin. Containing cannabinoids and the other compounds in the cannabis plant, because it was all around the seeds themselves. Yeah. So the idea that this is novel is just complete nonsense.
Okay. So
you know, I'm not.
But that's fine. And I know that's your view, right? Good. But what does Brexit mean for that? I guess
it means that as it's already been placed in the novel foods catalogue, then as I understand it, under the withdrawal agreements, that will automatically be carried across into UK law. But the FSA is not. But it's not law. All right. All it's
an interpretation. There's law, but it needs. But the list of what products are included is not. Right. So understood.
In the case, if you look on the website for the novel foods catalogue, it says this provides. The exact words are. It says this provides orientation for when something might need a novel foods authorisation, and individual states can introduce legislation to control these substances.
Right. So it's our option.
So it's our option. But so do you think that means that there's a likelihood that there will be a different interpretation?
But despite that, though, despite the fact there isn't law, the Food Standards Agency is taking it upon itself to say we are going to revise or recommend enforcement of this thing that isn't a law, but we're going to recommend enforcement. And the trouble is, if a trading standards officer or an environmental health officer comes into your shop or to your warehouse and says, "I'm going to take those off the shelf because the EU tells me they're novel foods," although that's not a law, you're not allowed to interfere with that officer in the execution of his duty, otherwise you'll get arrested. And the onus is then on you to take the matter to court, and it's only if the matter is then taken to court that a determination can be made as to whether these foods actually were novel foods or not.
Peter, can I ask a question here? Because is it the case, if it's our option, if we decide to enforce it or not, and basically adopt the novel foods there, if even before Brexit we're in that position where we're not doing so, is the question, how likely are we to do it post-Brexit?
Well, the Food Standards Agency consists of people who, for whatever reason, I won't speculate on their motives, but they clearly want to enforce this. And again, where does the drive to get... I mean, really what was going on here is that this huge industry, hundreds of millions of pounds now, was built up by small businesses, 1- and 2-man businesses, many of whom started literally selling out the back of their car or out of their garage. And suddenly it's become hundreds and hundreds of millions, and now the regulators are interested and the big business interests are interested. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
I accept it needs to be regulated, but coming back to the other issue, which is the whole point of novel foods regulations, is safety. I've asked the head of novel foods, the Food Standards Agency, in 2 or 3 incarnations now, do you have any evidence of CBD products not being safe? And the answer is no. So on that basis,
But look, I mean, okay. So, but the opposite view, I think, and the view that I think we have is that it is a novel food. It will inevitably end up being enforced as a novel food. No, but hear me out. But actually, this might be a huge opportunity for the sector, right? And it's something that you talked about, which is that there's an element of Wild West about the UK sector at the moment, that there are plenty of new companies coming in all the time, that there aren't necessarily standards that are adhered to by everyone. So, I admit that lots of, and certainly producers around the table, I'm sure, are producing very high standards, but there's no kind of guaranteed standard, right? Maybe this is a route through that. And I think that UK authorities are looking for ways in which they can try and apply some kind of control. And look, I also think novel food maybe is not such a bad
Has to be done by government,
I think internally there needs to be a framework put in place for quality assurance, but I think if you look at the quality controls we have to adhere to in order to export into Europe, GMP, GAP from an agricultural standpoint, we need something similar internally to ensure that we regulate quality.
Yeah.
Right, and claims.
Of course.
I think the area definitely could benefit from more standards.
Definitely.
Standardisation as well. And it does help facilitate that move from the Wild West, doesn't it, basically?
I don't think anybody in this industry that's got good morals disagrees with all the products. It's just don't mess with the product that works for people, right? And make it accessible. And,
Spot on.
Just don't, if Mother Nature's got the answer, don't start.
And in the UK, we've got the business about the Home Office giving guidance, which is incorrect, in my view, that CBD products cannot have any THC in them. And yet we've got to, if you take the THC out of an extract, then even I accept that it becomes novel. So
because you've done something.
It's catch-22. Okay. While we're on the question of regulation and impact of Brexit, so as you said, Peter, so there's a lot of carry across that's likely to happen in any scenario in terms of Brexit. I thought it might be interesting to sort of widen it out a little bit to talk about the approach to medicine, the approach, do you think, wider than just CBD as a consumer product. What do we think the UK is going to do post-Brexit in terms of approval of medicines, in terms of potentially kind of speeding up the process that medicines need to take to get through to clinical approval process? Any views on that from you guys? What do you think is going to happen?
I think there's going to be gradual progress in terms of precision medicine, but I think that is a closed market. I think you've got Big Pharma in the UK and also the government who are trying to put in policy and procedure to enable the NHS to effectively roll out cannabis-derived medicine. But essentially, I don't think you're going to see any more than 3 entities in the UK supplying medicine.
It's going to be a very closed shop.
It's closed already.
Yeah.
It's closed already, and it was closed when the legislation was brought out.
And Brexit won't change that? Really?
I don't think it will. I think what you'll get is a variance in the price that the NHS will have to pay. I saw a quote, and for the life of me, I can't remember, but it was one of the top 3 selling to the NHS, and the price per kilogram was astounding. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was reading.
Or extract,
Or extract, and what we're trying to do is enable the market to have the ability to acquire good quality products at a fair and reasonable price. Why should people be priced out of life-saving medicine?
It depends what you call medicine. We have a situation going on now where we've got, at the bottom, if you like, we've got food supplements. On top of that, we've now got the new thing, which is CBPMs, cannabis-based products for medicinal use. Everybody mixes those characters up, but that's the way it is in the regulations, CBPMs. And at the top of that, we've got licensed medicines, or medicines that have marketing authorization, which, wonderfully brave people at NICE have just approved 2 of yesterday. And anything that isn't in those, we're not allowed to call medicine.
So I find it interesting, the announcement yesterday, why it has to be classified as a specifically named medicine. Cannabis as an extract in various forms could perform that same job as that Epidiolex, whatever it is, Epidiolex. If you know the compounds of the plant and you understand what you're trying to treat, you don't actually need a pharma brand to give to somebody. That's just a money-making exercise, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
No, I mean, the flip side, I suppose, is that we are asking doctors to prescribe it, and
Yes.
I think there's an element of doctors needing to be given the confidence that they have a product. That's reassured.
So
Otherwise, they're not going to do it, right?
Yeah, of
and
course.
they're not doing it. I mean, that's the big problem as well. They're not doing it. Right?
The drug that was brought out yesterday is predominantly for epilepsy, right?
It's only licensed
For epilepsy. So there are countless studies and countless pieces of evidence where people have either utilised RSO, for example, or have utilised marijuana in its pure form as a smokable extract that has benefits on epilepsy.
Randomised controlled trials in the way that
exactly right. So why it has to go to such an extent where it is now classified as a drug from Big Pharma when
because the regulators all used to work. I mean, I don't really like using the term big pharma because I don't like to demonise the pharmaceutical industry, because as far as I'm concerned, the pharmaceutical industry has done a great deal of good.
Agreed.
There's a lot wrong with it as well, but it's done a great deal of good. But I mean, it is a fact that the regulators all used to work in the pharmaceutical industry.
Right. Okay.
The pharmaceutical industry's method has designed the method of regulation. And it's incapable about looking at things in a different way.
In a different way,
it's
right.
Completely incapable.
Yeah.
I think sometimes though, you have to take some of the passion out of this debate, actually, and say, switch the ones that we've been speaking about this week and replace it with a novel product completely unrelated to cannabis, and you'd probably still have the same expectations in place. I think often I come from particularly because we don't do that much on the pharma side, of course, it's meant in the field stuff, but you often get this clashing of almost civilizations. I personally don't always find it too helpful. And I think sometimes, yes, going back to the pharmaceuticals, sometimes there have been debates about, can the medicines be produced more cheaply, for instance, or sold more cheaply? And when you were speaking earlier to me, that was a kind of classic social responsibility debate. Somebody saying, actually, they don't have to be this price, if we can produce them this price, but they still have the same function and efficacy, then that's a benefit. And then there's a whole kind of capitalist argument.
That's exactly what I was trying to get across,
But going back to the sort of, the Brexit question again, it's almost sometimes in the last couple of years, we've got so absorbed in the concept of Brexit that we think everything is linked to Brexit. And it may well be that, no, it's not linked to Brexit. Sometimes things have to take time. Perhaps we have to be more patient.
I accept that, yes.
And proper studies have to be done for a good scientific basis.
They do, undoubtedly, but the trouble is, one of the clients I'm working with at the moment, the lead scientist there, said something to me which I know a lot of people in the sort of reform movement will find absolutely repellent. Said to me that the future for cannabis medicine is effectively in synthesizing whole plant medicine. So there'll be synthetic cannabinoids and synthetic terpenes and flavonoids, but they'll be combined in ratios that effectively approximates to synthesizing a plant, because that's what randomized clinical trials need in order to have a product that is consistent and produces reproducible results. Now, if that's the system we're going to go, we will go down that. I agree with you. We will go down that path, and the medical establishment will integrate cannabis into its pharmacopoeia. But I think that's a system that is so...
Not ready yet?
Well, it's a long way off being ready, but I mean, it's also completely unnecessary. We need a system that is much more flexible, which is why I come back to what I said earlier. What we need is a cannabis regulation authority. That takes all of this under an umbrella.
Yeah. All right. Good. Economic impact. Let's sort of change the theme a little bit. So Brexit may or may not have an economic impact. It may have an impact on investors' appetite for investing in the UK. So John Paul, I thought that very point, investment in the UK, what's your thoughts on that? And then more generally, all of us, what do we think about economic impact and the impact on the CBD industry?
Well, I think the key word is uncertainty. People are afraid to, move their positions or restructure and look at, alternative positions, whether it be cannabis or any other sector, until we have certainty which direction this Brexit debacle is going to go. You know, for us, we had the opportunity to form our hedge fund in the UK. We chose to go to Guernsey. Again, because it is cannabis-led, they were more open. Banking was more open. I think banking in the UK is a real struggle for cannabis-led businesses. I completely understand, you know, the bank's reluctances, but I don't think it's informed the decision-making process. I think they've been given, you know, certain parameters and certain guidelines of which they can operate in, and you know that stems from POCA, Proceeds of Crime Acts, and I think that needs a lot of clarity on the different types of, you know, cannabis business, whether it be, you know, CBD, you know, hemp-derived or THC medicine. So investing in cannabis specifically in relation to Brexit, we've seen a slight downturn in appetite for risk, but also I think, you know, people with the foresight and, you know, the courage to enter this space, irrespective of Brexit, certainly with the model that we've constructed, will do well. I'd be interested to see how, you know, interest rates are impacted moving past decision-making time, and how that impacts on investors' appetite will remain to be seen. But I think, you know, Brexit has provided some uncertainty from an investment standpoint.
Yeah, agreed. Stuart, have you got anything to add on that? I mean, do you agree on the uncertainty point?
Yeah, absolutely. If I take it from a customer point of view, who we're selling to at the moment, there's certainly a lot of, like, we know there's a lot of CBD stores opening up. They've put the brakes on it. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to expand. You've got brand owners who, again, are very careful about what they're doing, rather than being more aggressive and trying to develop their brands, and also big retail, right? The big retailers are still not, you know, they're giving the accessibility to the public, and they're not coming on board yet.
And if the FSA says enforce tomorrow, enforce this non-right, then what the big multiples, they're going to back off completely straight away.
Now, if we took this from a consumer point of view, we know Holland and Bayer have done very well. They're number one by far. That's because the consumer wants the product, right? And it's proven, right? Now, all the other health food stores, pharmacy stores, if they go out and really are confident that they've got a position legally that it's okay to do the range of products that's available, then we'll see massive expansion in the market. But and then we've got to talk then about social media, as the Facebooks of the world, and the online shops that are not again coming on board. So clarity by governments can really thrive this business and get it accessible. But right now, because of that uncertainty, it's very difficult.
Totally agree.
It's astonishing, this figure that, I mean, you probably know better than me, that, you know, the CBD market is now worth more than the whole of the rest of the vitamin and supplements market put together.
Well, by some estimates, and I mean, you know, and interestingly, you know, it's bigger, for example, in Germany. You were talking about Germany being very successful. We still think that the German CBD market is about or bigger than the medical cannabis market that's been going for 3 years, you know, so there's huge demand, and I you know, I totally agree. I think if there's a bit of legal certainty, you're going to get huge companies coming. Diageo will start to want to invest and produce CBD drinks. Of course they will.
They're doing it in Canada.
Yeah, but they're not going to do it worldwide until they have some kind of certainty, are they? So.
Well, that's why they tested Canada, right? A lot of these companies, through other companies, are testing the market. Even in California, you see it. But you're absolutely right. They won't put their listed company
well, it's a risk, isn't it?
Until there's legislation. But they're ready.
I mean, you know, but not. You know, what it comes down to is the pathetic standard of politicians and political leadership that we have on these issues, not just in the UK, but, you know. worldwide, really.
I think, yeah, I mean, I have.
But there's honest perceptions. I mean, there's honest
Yeah.
perception.
Yeah.
You know, the grandmother, your mother, who's in the cannabis.
I agree. I think they're reflecting public opinion.
You know,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
always say 70-80% of what we do is education.
I would say actually, I think some of the problem actually is sometimes we're in danger of using Brexit as an excuse, and let's hope it is over soon so we can get beyond Brexit. I think it creates a bit of a.
Then we had the Scottish Revolution there.
I'm looking forward to that.
I'm all for the Scottish Revolution, you know.
One revolution at a time.
Yeah.
But I think we have a bit of a mental block. I think, nonetheless, it is a fascinating sector. I've been to the most fascinating events. Of course, these CBD and Hemp Expos as well are always really interesting. You go there.
Superb events there, aren't they?
Yeah, I was actually at a farm innovation event last week, and we saw some people from cannabis organisations there. It was quite different to see them in a different context.
Very different, I'm sure.
Got the normal sustainability hat on there and sustainable agriculture. And there's still people popping up those events as well. But I think the real challenges or benefits potentially are, you know, once we get appropriate government structures in place, I think there is definitely a bandwidth issue at the moment in politics and ability to make any decision. You've also got the consumer appetite we spoke about. Yeah, Holland and Barrett, they were having big displays in the window, weren't they, really promoting the products? And there's an element of trust there, isn't it? You say it's in a high street retailer, yeah. You can trust it. And then I think really, particularly from the ADAS perspective, is all of those other benefits as well that the crop in the ground could bring. And then looking at the investment in the value chain that could bring, and thinking about the extra dimensions it could bring to crop innovation or farming innovation, or even the food sector innovation, which is always highly innovative. And I think other things. If you take, for instance, the hemp seed-based drinks, the like milk type products. You've got people like Good Hemp. Yeah. Been producing it for years. And of course, one of the big conversations going on at the minute in the climate change element of agriculture is looking at traditional forms of farming, and particularly dairy production. And is there a challenge there? And obviously, that's being grappled with as part of our commitments. And opening up things like hemp-based products in terms of more milk drinks. And educating them. But there's opportunities there as well.
Definitely.
Using so many things.
Yeah.
So I think I'm a half-class full person on this ultimately, but we really have to get past Brexit and this mental block thing before we can unlock these.
Agreed.
Yeah. Look, we're going to wrap it up, guys. Last question, just quick answers. We're sitting down at this table in 5 years' time. Where are we going to be? What are we going to be discussing, John Paul? What do you think?
Hopefully not Brexit.
Oh my goodness, that would be awful, wouldn't it?
Hopefully discussing how far the industry's come and the success stories within the industry, and it's widely accessible to patients that need it.
Yeah, good. Stuart?
I would like to see, the ideal story is how hemp can really change the world, right? And I would like to see it make that step. I'd like to see localized production, sustainable programs, healthy foods, plant-based, biodegradable products that are sustainable. It helps local farmers make money. That's where I would love to see the industry. The industry has got so far to go, and there's so much opportunity. Let's just hope that regulations allow it to just go as far as possible. Absolutely.
Yeah, very good.
I would love to see that.
I'm optimistic, but by then we will have what's in headline terms we can call legalisation.
Okay.
But I don't think it won't be legalisation in the sense that, hey man, everything's now. What it actually is legal regulation.
Okay.
But the whole sector will be properly regulated.
Yeah, good. 5 years, enough time, hopefully. Yeah, Colin.
Great. I'd like to think we're a big producer of CBD in the UK. It's sold well, it's trusted, it's agriculturally beneficial. We know lots about how to produce the crop, and we have, like Stuart said, we have all the other benefits as well that can really help us on that environmental journey we have to go on. And here's the thing, right? Even though Brexit's a problem now, we should be looking at this in our rear view mirror in a couple of years and saying, remember Brexit, we cracked it. But the real big thing we've got coming up is the environmental challenge. And that's absolutely
It's just going to play a big role, isn't it?
Yeah, and ultimately, it's healthier people and a healthier planet. Right?
Brilliant.
So we can do that with this planet.
See, if you put us in charge of it, we'll sort it all out.
Nice optimist again, right. Thanks, guys. I'd like to thank Hemp and CBD Media for organising this. I thought that was a very interesting session. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you.
Good.